Hello everyone, I'm Michelle Foster of iTalent Digital. Welcome to this webinar about revenue leakage, where we're going to show you a proven method for discovering and recovering leaked revenue. Today you'll be hearing from Fred Walters and Mark Villamek of iTalent Digital. At the end of their talks, there's going to be an interactive Q&A discussion. So as you think of questions for the speakers, go ahead and type them in the questions box on your screen, then hit send to put them in the queue. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our two speakers. If you want to go to the speaker slide. Fred Walters is general partner at iTalent Digital and leads the company's digital transformation efforts. He leads strategic and transformational practices in enterprise collaboration, big data, business intelligence, mobile, and cloud, along with business development. And Mark Villamek is a data forensics scientist at iTalent Digital. He has broad expertise that encompasses all levels of the enterprise, from high-level policies through processes and systems, all the way down to the source code. When it comes to revenue leakage, not only can he sniff out the leaks wherever they may occur, but he can also translate the findings into clear, actionable insights and recommendations. Mark heads up the implementation of iTalent Digital's cross-system modeling process for identifying leaked revenue, which is the process you'll be hearing about on this webinar. And with that, I'll hand it over to Fred to get us started.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you all first for attending this webinar and your participation and interest in webinar in the revenue leakage. Just a little background on iTalent. We're a global consultancy company. We have offices in the Silicon Valley, Austin's RTP, the UK, as well as Hyderabad and other regions. We are proud to have customers like Cisco, Yahoo, Microsoft, Veritas, Sephora, Restoration Hardware, Palo Alto Networks, and many others. We are not a company that is all things to all people. We're focused on specific practice areas, one of those being revenue leakage, and Mark will be able to talk to that. And with those practices, we have deep technology understanding, as well as methodology, as well as the best talent on the planet. And I'd like to, introduce Mark here as far as having that data forensics background. And really, when you think of CSI and that type of thing, that's what he is to revenue leakage, is to be able to get in and sniff this information out and where there are problems with revenue leakage. And for me, I have a real world example where in my own home over the holidays, I had a leak in my upstairs bathroom, and it was just a leak, a drip. And as you can see, what occurred from that drip was essentially $10,000 worth of damage, which, if I would have replaced a gasket for 25 cents, I could have saved that $10,000. So we can liken this to what these companies and what companies are going through and identifying where are leaks occurring within the activities around revenue creation and revenue booking and those type of things. And that's where Mark will get into as well, is really if we can put a little bit of investment, and that's what we're talking about here, allowing iTalent to look at investing in your organization, understanding where those leaks may occur, and being able to save a whole lot and frankly recover a lot moving forward. And with that, I'll just turn it over to Mark, being able to go deeper into our revenue leakage capability.
So revenue leakage, let's talk about what revenue leakage is. Let's refine what the problem statement is. Revenue leakage is those small unnoticed losses of revenue that occurs naturally in any small or large company. This is revenue that should have been made by the company but is lost in numerous ways. And most of the time for large enterprises, it's lost because their infrastructure is so complex. There's so many data handoffs between so many systems. There's so many parties and folks they interact with, whether it's resellers, integrators, the customers, OEMs, and they're all hitting various systems, and these systems, as well engineered as they are, have a lot of corner cases and a lot of opportunity where revenue can be lost. When I say lost is when a business deal when some smaller transaction just gets lost in the noise between systems and system handoffs and data integrations, and companies don't notice it. They think it's a kind of a rounding error. So when they say, hey, I know I have issues with my systems, and it's just a rounding error. It's 2%, and the perceived impact of 2% is just written into its normal losses. But in reality is that 2% is an additive number. So over time, as you see on the right, it starts adding up over time. So on a $2 billion company, this is $80 million. This number keeps growing quarter over quarter over quarter until it becomes a much larger problem for your bottom line. And it's just a drag with your entire business, because every quarter, every year, you're losing another 2%, 4%, 5%, depending on your leakage, how much revenue leakage you have in your infrastructure. You're losing that money, and that money, you're losing more every quarter. So it's a problem that grows and compounds into a much larger issue. So let's talk about how this happens within your company. So your company has many technology silos. So you have your sales cloud, which is your CRM, which is where all your opportunities and deals are being managed and handled. And the sales folks then work with your legal systems, where they have legal contracts that they negotiate over. And most of those legal contracts are not digitized. That is, digitized as in getting key data elements over to drive other systems. Most of these are still PDFs or documents with some form of over digitalization, but not enough that allows systems like, if you have a CPQ system, a configure price quote, like Big Machines or Aptus or any other providers, if they have challenges getting data from those legal contracts, and those legal contracts are quite complex, elaborate, the terms and conditions are always corner cases. So you know the deal is $24 million, but you don't know how that translates when it comes to pricing and quoting something. So, and those systems then have to then feed these quotes out to your supply chain, which your reseller then has to put that quote back to its distributor, back from the distributor back to you, and then to your OEMs, et cetera, through your order management tool, your Oracle system. And the Oracle system is only as good as the data it's receiving from whatever inputs come from upstream from it. So eventually that does get translated into your Oracle install base and service contract database, but again, that's a separate Oracle module with a separate set of challenges managing it and challenges getting data from order management and translating those service contracts and install base back to that customer on the far end that you're using, that was getting the order. So, and then ownership of these tools, when you start thinking about your business ownership, sales owns, may or may not, sales legal may own the legal contracts, sales may own your legal contracts database. Big Machines is halfway between sales and finance, and the services definitely own the install base, but have some overlap with finance as well. These organizations have their own incentives and goals, but sales is all about the funnel, all about throughput, about getting deals in the door. They care about pricing so much as it relates back to their commissions, their paychecks, etc. Finance takes over somewhere around CPQ and order management and tries to maximize whatever flows through their pipeline to the service side, and service cares about what service contracts that they have to service, not necessarily who sold it, if it was priced correctly, if it met the conditions of the MSA in the legal, the master services agreement in the legal contract with whatever customer. So you have all these silos within your organizations, and they all have different competing interests, and their tools are configured to align to their interests, not necessarily the interest of the greater company. So of course, when these organizations then have to put out their reports, you start seeing their sales have their forecasting reports, they have some booking reports coming out, what gets booked in terms of deals, or bookings reports as part of the finance, but bookings, billings, revenues, retention, these different organizations produce different reports. And when you go to try to tie these reports out, I know a lot of companies have been trying to do the BBR, billings, bookings, billings, revenue, to try to say, okay, what's my forecast? And with 606, they're trying to do a lot of fair valuation of the services on the far right. And these reports always have rounding errors, and it's always difficult to get the different people that produce these different reports to get those numbers to tie out. So you start to see some of these issues that I'm mentioning with these system integrations and incentives coming out these reports. And I know for a lot of executives and leadership that we work with on a regular basis, building these reports, getting these systems to work, getting these reports to work is really challenging and difficult. So I want to talk a little bit about how our approach and how we start to try to break these silos. So a lot of folks have heard about iTalent and our customer data management organization, our team that's done stupendous work at various large companies in the Bay Area and elsewhere. This is part of what we try to use as one of our tools. So when we look at how we map your customers through your systems, we will pick a customer. Say, in this case, we use Airbus. And we will follow that customer journey through your CRM, through your legal contracts, all the configuration, pricing, quotes, everything they've ever received in terms of paper, to what orders have come in through the supply chain related back to Airbus as an install base, all the way over to your install base database to see what they've been provisioned and entitled. So we try to connect these systems by just modeling based on a customer. And Airbus as a company might sound simple, it's a company, but in reality, when you start looking at a customer database, what Dun & Bradstreet reports is Airbus is 14 different global ultimate IDs. And their parent IDs might not necessarily map up to Airbus. So Airbus in China, for example, it maps to the Chinese government because of Chinese law. Dun & Bradstreet reflects legal ownership of the company, not necessarily the company's actual ownership. So Airbus or General Motors will appear to be owned by Chinese government or be a freestanding entity because the Chinese law says 51% of those companies must be owned by a foreign entity. So Airbus Beijing does not roll up to Airbus in France or Airbus in Europe. So, and also then Airbus has a lot of sub-entities that go by different trade names. So depending on who entered the order in the supply chain, they could have said ATR, they could have called it Eurocopter, Airbus helicopters. It could be under different companies. All these companies roll up to your master service agreement, your master discounting, your enterprise agreement, your legal contract that says this is Airbus and here's everything they've been entitled to and provisioned to. So when you look across the legal contracts, you look in the opportunities and legal contracts, you'll see all these different entities. We typically see on any given company, whether any major global company, thousands of locations, which all have strange names or different names. As you see in this list on the right here, we're just giving some samples of how many different ways you can put an Airbus. And some of these map to Dun & Bradstreet, many don't. So for a company to say, okay, I'm rolling up my reporting to Dun & Bradstreet, it doesn't answer the problem. And to have humans, your field, your finance folks, to try to map this is also challenging. So we've actually figured out some routines and to develop some technologies to allow us to start mapping your customers together so you can actually see Airbus in its entirety. And when I say entirety, we're just giving this an example of how we stitch together Airbus through one company, through one journey, in terms of forecast amount of opportunities, how much money is being sold in the current pipeline, to how much was in the MSA agreement, to how much was quoted, how much was ordered, how much is in service contract, how much was due. And also, we find that Airbus, and a lot of the smaller, with these larger companies, a lot of their smaller entities or smaller locations might have a $1,000, $10,000 order. And there might be a lot of these smaller orders that your sales team don't pick up because they doesn't appear to be Airbus, Airbus Global. None of the Airbus teams see it as part of them, even though it's part of their quotas. So those small deals, which look like small deals, are actually part of a major deal, get not renewed, they get dropped, they get lost in the system. So you start leaking revenue from one customer alone in Airbus, for this example. So in terms of track record, this is one of many examples of where we've looked across these systems and stitched the data together, stitched the processes, and understand how companies leak revenue, where they leak revenue. These are real numbers of real projects that we've run where we've found money, various opportunities, money that some of these are annual, some of these are quarterly, some of these are just a one-time find. We go and crawl through your systems and data to find out issues. Wrap and roll, where sales guys, this is just a one-off project. We found $19 million where sales folks were taking renewals out of the renewal bucket, put into a new bucket, discounting it like crazy, and doing all kinds of crazy stuff in order to push it through as new business, and mostly because they were getting incentive, they were getting comped through your compensation process on new business, and they weren't getting comped on renewals business. So there was a policy issue here, which was driving behavior, which was driving discounting behavior and other behaviors that ended up costing this particular company $19 million in just one period that we looked at. We see all kinds of other stuff, like $330 million. This was renewal opportunities not loaded to the sales team, to the partners, not communicated. These were service contracts, they were expiring, and for various issues within IT, there was data corruption, data missing, data formatting, process issues, human issues, et cetera, ended up being a $330 million lost renewals that they did not renew, that we discovered for them, and we were able to get back to their sales teams, to their partner teams, to start going after those renewals to do some recapture there. So across the board, we have a lot of stuff that $172 million on the far right, when I say missed late renewals, is $172 million off of 2 lines of coding errors. So $172 million is missed because they saw when customer was late on the renewal, there's a process that automatically set up the future renewal. It was missed by this code to pick it up, to load it back into the Sales Cloud from the service contract database. So basically, think of it as a trash truck going down the street. It had a one-time sweep, but it missed some stuff and left it on the side of the curb. So this one little bit of code was keeping a certain amount of business, leaving business behind, and we added a couple more lines of code to bring a second trash truck to pick up the remaining stuff that was left behind from the first one. So very simple coding change. It required our team to really get into the data, understand the process, understand the data flows, understand the source code. This is 70,000 lines of source code we audited to find this leak that ended up being $172 million of leakage. So we have a lot of cases. We can talk to you about all different kinds of systems and processes and issues that we've seen. This is only some examples. We've done this for many years, whether under the guise of CRM or audits under ERP, but it all carries the same theme of revenue leakage, recovering money that should be part of your business. So a lot of folks want to ask about our engagement model. We also want to differ here as a business. iTalent differs from traditional consulting shops, where consulting shops will sell you revenue leakage and they'll give you a lot of great presentations and sell the board, sell the executives, but at the end of the day, they don't recover much. They don't find much, and it puts a damper on the whole concept of revenue leakage because they don't have teams that understand this process. So for us, we have specialized teams, specialized resources that come in and do the analysis. We will set up Tiger teams. We'll get all your SMEs in the room, coupled with our data scientists, our software engineers. When I say software engineers, these are Silicon Valley geeks that we've recruited out of startups. They've built companies that have been sold to Microsoft and Cisco. So we have some really amazing talent on the software and data side. And we have these folks that understand a much broader base of technologies and processes and systems. And we spend the time to go through the systems, walk the data, walk the source code, walk the process, understand what is going on. We do the traditional PM interviews as well and hear from SMEs, but at the end of the day, we really want to get into your data and source code as fast as possible to understand where your real issues are, and also to quantify those issues. We want to actually know what's the impact. Is there data corruption on a certain data element that's breaking a process? Well, what's the impact of that? We were in Florida earlier this year with another client, and we kept hearing there's this huge issue that's causing us to have revenue leakage, massive issue. So when we actually understood, we sat with the team to understand what they consider this issue. We went through the data, found it was it was an issue, but it was only $300,000 of revenue leakage, and the cost to fix that properly would have cost many times more, and that the manual processes and workarounds they had in place just needed some adjustments to keep that going, but it wasn't as big as the team was pitching. So what we want to make sure is we understand what the issue is, what's your immediate dollar impact, what can you do in recapture to save the money, and that translates into very clear expectation plans with very clear measurables. So we want to make sure when we implement this, what's the impact you should see, when should you see it, how should it work, what's the before and after. So we don't want to sit here and sell you PowerPoint slides and constant meetings, which we don't deliver results. We want to actually have action plans that either your team can deploy and execute against, or you can have us as iTalent come in, work with you to make these adjustments, make these fixes, to test and deploy them. We want to change the paradigm. Yes.
And Mark, that can't be understated or overstated in a sense of, you know, the type of resource that we have. The one word on here is execution. We are about execution. And it's the talent that's been brought to the table. You and our whole team around this is they're technologists at heart. They're also the data scientists, and they have the business acumen to be able to understand what's needed and where the problems are. And they've been there and done it. That's the key, is these aren't about college hires coming in, not having the experience to really understand, and frankly, the years and years of experience of being steeped in the technology, being steeped in the data, and being steeped in the business. So that's really the differentiation that we bring to the table, is the experience and the ability to execute. Is that fair to say, Mark?
Absolutely. I always call my team. I always tell them, for iTalent is incredible talent. I've loved my teams. I love the folks we hire and recruit, and the folks we deploy these teams at these company sites. They are really incredible folks. They all have very colorful and rich backgrounds in technology, and things they've done just sometimes is mind-blowing for me. And the work they do at our client sites is mind-blowing. I mean, really roll up the sleeves, really get into it. It's amazing to see them in execution. And they're really passionate about what they're doing. So you'll see them. This last summer, we had a team deployed at a client site and literally worked around the clock. I mean, 18-hour days for 8+ weeks to do this basically impossible project that the client had bounced around forever. And they said, okay, we need to get this done by this date because it's interdependent on these deployments. And everybody's like, it's impossible to do. And our team just jumped in there. They rolled the sleeves and just executed, and delivered things as beyond the customer's expectations. So just go a little bit deeper in engagement model real quick of how we approach it from a data sciences perspective, because I think a lot of folks, we've heard from a lot of customers, we present this slide to a lot of customers, they really want to understand how we do it different. And we're about transparency here. We'll tell you how we do it different, how we do it, and telling you doesn't equate to execution. So we're not afraid to show you how we do things in the back end, because we know it's not that easy to take our stuff and implement it, because you have to have that kind of talent to be able to pull this off. So we'll start at the top. Normally when we start business needs, there's some business questions called. So we usually sit down with the executive, with the board, whoever we work with, understand what they're really after in terms of what the business needs, what kind of issues they're feeling or seeing, or whether their renewal rates are dismal, or whatever things are driving them nuts. And we also have a lot of domain expertise, industry knowledge. So when they're like the benchmarks, and we can do some basic benchmarking and say, this is where you think you're at, this is where the industry's at, whether it's, how many headcount you have per dollar, or what the renewal rates are, or the cost of renewal, et cetera. We have a lot of metrics because we've done this a lot. So we understand the key performance indicators, we understand your business, and we want to understand how your business operates. And this is where we actually move from the executive to talk to some of your SMEs in the business. So we want to understand how your system works, how do you guys configure your infrastructure different than other folks, or what's the little nuances, what tools you're using, how's the data flow, who's the APIs, who's going on. So then we go back, within our own team. We started understanding, okay, what kind of analytical approach can we apply to this? What do we need to do this in data analysis? What kind of resources do we need? And let's pull together the data requirements. So then once we get the data requirements out there, then we go back to the client and say, okay, with your data warehouse team or your business teams, hey, this is the data we're looking for this kind of work that we plan on doing. And so they'll do the extraction, they'll collect the data for us. Our data engineering team will then look through that data, probably go back to the customer a couple of times to the data requirements to understand little nuances, because some data elements don't line up, some stuff doesn't make sense, keys are different, etc. So then we do a little bit more data testing, and it goes into interpretation to preparation. So when I say interpretation, data preparation, we have specialized tools we use. Our specialized tools need the data a certain way. So our data engineering team will take your data, massage it, fix or fill the holes, make it so we can actually do some data modeling. So this is where our tools technology team really comes in. So now we have these models, these algorithms, these testings that allow us to come through this process and evaluate your data flows, your mappings. If in the case of the Airbus example I was talking about earlier, we take all the different key metadata, so like location data, company name, order types. We take a lot of metadata around the customers to build a map of that customer. So sure, right off the bat, the Dun & Bradstreet is a quick way of mapping it, but then you have to do some deep introspective. So when people start abbreviating stuff, like we found in one customer, there's 186 different ways of spelling IBM. And Dun & Bradstreet had problems dealing with this 186 different ways of spelling IBM. And we are able to find all the different connotations and typos and extra spaces and dots. And our preparation and our algorithms could deal with that stuff that Dun & Bradstreet couldn't deal with and start providing us maps back to the data. And then also then we take the keys that come out of that and map it back to your other data sets, so your bookings, your CRM, your other systems that we've gotten for your data requirements. So then we can start painting a picture of your entire business across the different data silos. So we'll evaluate it, and then we'll do some fun visualizations, because visualizations only, people don't think in numbers and words. It's hard for folks to read. It's hard for folks to go through millions of rows of data. So we like to visualize a lot of what we do, help you understand the scope and scale of the problem or quantify the size. And so we do a bit of a visualization, and then we go into the executive review where we present our findings back to the executive team, get feedback, understand if we answer the questions, if we understand that we solved the business need. If not, what do we need to change? And we'll go through this process, iterative process. And we just make this a pretty fast iterative process, loop, fast, and try to get through it as quickly as possible. Hope that makes sense for folks. Oh, and yeah, this is an example of what we do from a week-to-week basis. So do have good renewal rates. We know the renewal rates and pricing. We identify the systems and sources. You can read through this. By end of week 1, we've engaged with your business teams. We have a good fundamental understanding what the business is after. Then by weeks 2 or 3, we go through all the data stuff so we can get all the data for you. Week 2 to 4, we go through all that evaluation analytics, and then week 5 and 6, we do the prep and feedback and scheduling of those meetings. So basically, we try to compress the initial pass list within 6 weeks, and then go from there to build out the larger project plan. So we do this as part of the initial assessment program. So we'll look at a handful of customers, 1, 5, whatever customer wants to look at, or different cases, scenario that makes sense to the customer, and we just do this fast iteration, going through data, through processes to build a basic pattern that we can apply to much larger data sets. So typically we'll look at handful and then apply. And differentiator, like you've heard earlier, we have folks that are amazing tech folks in the Valley here and beyond. And the reason why they are so good is they live their life across these multiple layers. So we always like to view it from policy. What's the company's policy around incentive comp models? What's the company's policy around how they deal with this kind of order, this kind of distributor, or what general policies govern the company? So these are the macro laws. And then those policies get translated into processes that the company runs on, processes being human processes that interface with those systems. So you have your order to cash folks that follow certain processes, that engage with certain systems that generate data. So the data becomes the output of good or bad policies. So this is, while this is stacked as a OSI model, really what we see is the data is never result of policy, and what policies can you change to change the processes, systems, and get the data you need. So we think of this technology stack like this, and we have resources that understand the full stack, and we also have resources that specialize in each one of these layers. So we have policy wonks, we have process folks, Six Sigma, black belt process folks that actually know the systems. We have people that, in the system side, that know Salesforce, Oracle, SAP, like the back of their hand. They know down to the source code level. And then, of course, we have our data scientists and data engineers. So we make sure we cover the full stack, and we staff it with high skill, high quality folks that come from leading edge companies working on the latest types of technologies. So that's one of our key differentiators, is our talent. So that concludes my portion of the presentation. I'd like to open this up to questions and answers.
Yeah, and Mark, I see a question coming in as well, and it kind of alludes back to something I experienced with my issue, with my leak. And for example, my office door, it was sticking. It wasn't opening right. I thought, I said, oh, that's probably the house settling a bit. Not realizing after a month, when I identified that there was actually a leak upstairs, hundreds, thousands of dollars of damage occurred. So with that, and the question is, what are some of the symptoms that you would potentially say, hey, if you're seeing this, that, or the other thing, you should probably call iTalent or look at it yourself on something's going on? What are some of those symptoms that the customers would potentially see?
Yeah, I mean, they see it in the reports on a daily basis. It's margin erosion, price erosion, not hitting quotas. They also sense it on the renewals when they start seeing that. They say, well, I should have $1.5 billion in renewals this quarter, but I'm not achieving those goals that we've set that logically should be there. What's going on? And folks will always fall back to the same basic things like, oh, your door's sticking because it's just settling. But that's just the quick explanation, and people just want to kind of shut down that conversation. So you really have to say, well, let's get a second opinion here why that door is sticking, right? So call iTalent when you want to understand that, hey, you're missing your quotas because what? So like we had one customer, their third-party renewal agent for the low tier stuff was missing quotas. And here and there, they're just saying, well, the product's just not selling. Nobody wants to renew the service contract. You haven't updated the product. There was the typical array of pushback from the third party and from the people managing the third party because they didn't want to be caught with their pants down. So we went in there and we just quietly observed. We walked through the third party. We sat with our team. Not in a very, very passive role. We looked at this. So we started looking at data, systems, and processes, and then we also discovered that, when you start looking at Salesforce reports, you look at the call logs on these renewals. Basically, if the renewal agent called and nobody picked up, they said, oh, the person didn't want to renew. And then we started looking at their incentive model, and it was in their legal contract with this third party. The third party was paid $25 per opportunity worked, irregardless outcome. Then they had a special thing. If they hit their quota, they got this small bonus, but they hadn't hit their quota in 10 quarters, so they weren't getting their bonus. So they weren't getting the extra financial incentive to really work the deals, and they were getting paid no matter what. So they just exploited that legal contract, and ended up being just a change in the agreement, the policy level of the legal contract that changed the incentive of that third party to actually start getting the renewals back into the direction that the company was expecting. So just a small change in the legal agreement changed everything for the entire business. And nobody bothered to look at that. Nobody even thought about looking at that or asking those questions because they were too busy trying to be defensive and just trying to keep people from asking too many questions. Hope that made sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Mark. We have a few other questions in the queue. One of them, it has to do with renewal rates, which is something that's come up a lot in this webinar. And the question is there a benchmark contract renewal rate we should be comparing our own renewal rates against?
That's variable based on your product and technology and business model. So it's not an easy question to answer right off on the phone like this, but if you think of a software business or software services business where it's more of a SaaS type model, you should have like 90% renewal rate. And if you have anything less, then you need to figure out what's going on, whether your product, your pricing, your systems, how you're approaching the market. There's a lot of different things that could be causing your renewal rates not to line up to what your industry standard is. But off the cuff, it's variable. We have to sit down and understand your business, understand your business model, then we can compare you to other companies that we know.
Okay, thanks. Next question is, who is or who are the most critical people to be involved in the revenue leakage identification effort, and what is expected of them? So including how much of their time will be required.
Well, at the end of the day, it's accountability in your company. It's who's accountable for achieving those financial goals. So that typically falls onto this financial organization, and then it falls to the sales organization when it comes to the incentive comp models from the executive level. So it depends on your company again, but it always lines up to incentive models within those companies, and the ultimate accountability aligns up to those incentive models. That made sense kind of a little bit.
Yeah, hopefully they can ask another question, a follow-up question if you didn't get the answer you were expecting. Fred, were you going to say something?
Yeah, there's another question I'm seeing there as well. And as far as the 6 week, you gave the 6 week example. What is the deliverable? What is the asset that is going to be left behind from that 6 weeks?
So what we are showing here was an example of a customer. We had some assets. We broke down their revenue. On the far left, there's detailed analysis. We broke down the revenue leakage. Here was the total dollar impact, customer counts, understand what the problem was, give some point examples of how those problems were impacting them. In this case, they had a lot of data issues, and there was some data replication where data was getting scattered across records. So we showed them examples how their financial and business and contract data was getting scattered across multiple duplicate records because of an IT bug, and that created this much dollar impact. So we broke down each one of the issues as much as we could, give them enough examples that they could take action on it. And then we also said, okay, for the key couple of issues that you have, this is how, in the clear action plans, this is what happens if you were to solve these problems. And here's how the numbers would change, how your numbers would shift, how your dollars would shift, or your percentage would shift. So in this case, we wanted to, there was a lot of hand-holding of the lower expected results. The bottom chart you see, there was a lot of hand-holding, a lot of human processes being generated because of all these problems. And we were going to drive down the categories of human process to lower the cost, significantly lower the cost of operation for that particular example. Another one was we try to measure all those results, and then we just give you an action plan. Say, okay, here's the major things you need to fix, and this is how you fix it, and this is the results you get. So, and you kind of get something like this. It varies from team to team, but at the end of the day, we want to make sure we have everything that's quantifiable, measurable, actionable, and gives you something that you could drive as your initiatives for your next fiscal year or 36-month plan. So we really want to empower our executives, our customers at the executive level to have organizational plans that really drive the business forward as opposed to just more fixing little things. And this has resonated well. It's helped many of our customers really be successful.
Mark, here's a question about ROI, and as far as at what point during the effort will we start to see ROI, and what are the critical success factors to minimize the time to ROI?
Wow, okay. Well, so a lot of times we're engaged for immediate ROI. So just earlier this spring, we were working with a customer that needed to go find money. So we crawled through their systems and we uncovered $160 million that they can action upon. $160 million of revenue that was leaked, and we found the reasons why it was leaked. So their IT teams had reasons to go fix that, how to fix that, what was causing it, and we delivered to the sales team a list of $160 million of the deals that were not renewed, that should have been renewed, that weren't presented to the sales guys, weren't in their CRM, wasn't for somebody to, our sales folks have a lot of deals. People are like, oh, sales guys always remember what deals they're working on, who to renew. When you're in this day and age with the opportunity and load you're putting on your field, the amount of data we have out there, it's easy for data to get lost. And $160 million on, I think it was like a 5,000 person sales force they had, is pretty, actually a lot of small deals, a lot of large deals, medium-sized deals, people leaving the company, knowledge lost, and it was a sizable number, $160 million. And can't disclose how much they actually recovered, but you can't recover all the 160 million, but they recovered a good percentage of that and really made their quarter. So that was instant ROI for this company. Other stuff, it takes a little bit longer to ROI, but we always want to make sure that we tie back to something because we have these plans and the detail analysis, ties back to something actionable and real.
Thank you. There's something about usual suspects. So you've been talking a lot about renewal rates. Is that sort of the first thing that you start looking at, the most usual suspect when you're trying to uncover revenue leaks, or are there any others that you start with right away looking at?
Yeah, it depends on who our sponsor is. So we said renewals because that's one of the hot areas. I know the federal government's putting a lot of pressure on renewals of technology companies. So we see that with a lot of technology companies that do service contracts with the government for their products. And with the current administration trying to renegotiate all the deals, there's a lot of pressure, a lot of interest in that space. So we have seen some customers have significant revenue loss on the renewal side because of the current administration. But there's other areas. There's other areas you have revenue leakage, from pricing to distribution to logistics, supply chain. There's a lot of places where it's not just on the sales side, but there's other stuff that impacts it. So it really depends on the organization we're talking to, the sponsorship, and what their key business issues. And remember, revenue leakage encompasses money that should be the company's money, not going to somebody else's pocket. So this is dollars that should be yours. So if you're losing those dollars to your suppliers, you're losing dollars to your supply chain through incentives and comps and over discounting. If you're losing money to a lot of different places, you as a corporate citizen is responsible and accountable for trying to keep as much of the company's money together and with the company, so the company can reinvest those dollars into R&D, new products, to your paychecks, your bonuses, etc., and not let that money go out to places where you didn't need to lose it. So think of it as your personal bank account. You don't want to spend more money than you should, neither should the company. And you want to retain as much money as possible within the business, and there's a lot of different ways you can lose money.
That's for sure. It looks like we still have some time for a couple more questions. This one is referring to slide 10, and it's saying that it looks similar to a BBR report that we have been trying to build but can't figure out due to numerous issues. How do you solve this?
Yes, earlier I mentioned the bookings, billings, revenue. I think they're just talking about BBR. This is
right.
This is a concept a lot of folks have been trying to say, okay, if I want to forecast out to my business, I want to understand what I've booked, what have I billed, and what have I recognized as revenue. And the problem is there's a lot of specialized tools covering each one of the aspects area. The underlying data is not sufficient in connectivity and quality to be able to make BBR work for most companies, the vast majority of companies actually. And so I know a lot of organizations are incredibly challenged. And those that even say that they got a BBR report, it's still it's a number that's okay, but not 100% solid. So there's still a lot of there's a lot of gaps in their BBR reports. Sometimes we talk about tens of billions of dollars, it doesn't look as missing $100 million, but for a smaller company, you're missing $100 million, you're missing a few $1 million, it hurts.
So for those of you that don't know the acronym, Mark, can you give them the acronym?
It's bookings, billings, and revenue. And some companies will add opportunity, which is like leads, and it's just how you measure your pipeline to revenue. So because when you book, just because you booked a $20 million deal, you don't get the money right away. That $20 million deal is going to be $5 million over the next 4 years. So you have to get orders, and then you have to bill those orders. So you get $5 million for the 1 year. But you can't recognize that $5 million as revenue on that same year. You have to recognize, given the financial rules, you have to recognize revenue as the month occurred or the quarter occurred, et cetera. So that $5 million then gets broken down further. So then you have to think of all those deals and think about how all this math works. And you got to try to extract this data from all these different systems. And like I mentioned earlier, just because you have booked it in your front-end legal contract as $20 million, you have to see the orders coming in, and hey, if your customer name is different, they ordered to a different location, your system messed up, didn't see $1 million that billings because it's associated to a different account. Also, you're like, hey, I got $4 million of the $5 million. I don't know where the other $1 million went. Maybe the customer didn't order it. So then you have this, you try to start chasing it, and then when you go to recognize revenue, you have this miscellaneous bucket of revenue recognition that adds up to this huge number. You're like, where this revenue that we're recognizing coming from? So from a financial governance and audit perspective, it's not good when you have these kind of issues. And so folks have been trying really hard to try to figure this out, bridge this gap. And it's just you just need specialized folks that understand your systems to the level we do to really help you go through that journey of stitching this stuff together, making your systems work in such a way that you can do a BBR. And then you can even go further beyond BBR to opportunity forecasts and see how your pipeline's growing, so you can start putting more confidence to your investors.
That's great. I think we're coming pretty close to the top of the hour. Maybe we can close out. Any last questions, Michelle, or are we good?
There was just one, and it says, what is there an acceptable rate of revenue leakage? So I guess it's kind of like the natural rate of unemployment, where there's you're never going to have zero revenue leakage. So is there a point at which you can say, well, you're pretty much there's like an acceptable rate or a minimum rate, or do you try to get to perfection?
It depends on how much the company wants to invest in this, right? Acceptable rates. I mean, most folks don't even know how much they're leaking. They don't know how much their pipe. The current water issue we have in California, when they say, well, we'll just bill you more for water, but then 30% of the water is lost to the pipes. Where? Not sure. We kind of have ideas where you could be losing water, but we know that the water we collect from the mountains doesn't get to the houses that 1 meter, so we lose 30% somewhere in transit. So you could apply something similar to your company to understand how much you're losing. You're like, hey, what we're booked versus what recognized revenue, what's the gap there? What's the gap between my various reports, and where could that money have gone? How did I lose that money between my opportunity all the way to what I've got in revenue?
But suffice to say, based on the investment, the diminishing returns is pretty high on this, as far as, just finding a little can pay off dividends pretty quickly, right? So. Yeah.
Well, remember, it's a compounding issue. So every dollar you find this year, it's going to be 80 cents. It's going to be $1 next year plus more. So you keep compounding this issue. So if you leave that dollar loss in place this year, you're going to lose that dollar plus another $1 next year, and you're going to keep losing more and more money. You want the whole. It's the compounding interest model in backwards. So the more you lose this year, even more you're going to lose the following year and subsequent years or subsequent quarters.
Yeah.
So just think a compounding model, how the compounding interest works for somebody starting off their investment at 20 years old versus somebody at 40 years old. Use that same mindset that people are familiar with and just put it in reverse in terms of leakage. Or even personally, they can apply that personally. I paid so much for my cell phone this year, and I keep paying it, and I don't renegotiate how much I pay for my cell phone. So the forecast out 10 years, you've lost a lot of money because you didn't bother to renegotiate it.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's what we end up doing is renegotiating data centers or service contracts with other companies, like slicing 40% off your cost. So this is very popular with IT infrastructure. Actually, we've been doing this the past few years. Is just, hey, you're moving to the cloud, but you have all this legacy infrastructure. It's time to renegotiate those contracts. Those legacy infrastructure people are willing to give you a discount because they don't want to lose you as a customer 100%. So they'll give you better rates. You recover millions of dollars from infrastructure you're moving away from, and that $1 million just keeps adding up to more money you can invest into future stuff. So that's another way to think of revenue leakage. It's just try to save all those little dollars so you have more money to invest in other places.
Yeah. Mark, if we can go to that closing slide again. And I think we're pretty much here as far as there's contact information here, RevLeak at iTalentdigital.com. Feel free to reach out to that. And just in closing, you know, again, iTalent is not all things to all people. We really focus on various practices between BI, enterprise collaboration, as well as we have a practice around revenue leakage, and Mark leading that up. And it's really made up of, as I mentioned, talent. And Mark, I think, is a great microcosm of the talent that exists in this particular practice. And it's not, he doesn't only know it, and I think he can get from his presentation here, is that he's passionate about it as well. And that's not unique to Mark. That is consistent across the practice as well, that they, again, have that technologist mindset. They have the business acumen, and they know data backwards and forwards and being there. And in addition to the talent, having that methodology based on, Mark describes all these activities and all these customer engagements that we've been involved in. It's based on that experience that this methodology has been developed. So it's not just created out of thin air, it's based on real world examples. And then finally, the IP and the technology. Based on this experience, Mark and team has built algorithms that can be leveraged and technology that can be leveraged based on that experience. So that's what we bring to the table. People like Mark, the technology, the methodology to be able to deliver, frankly, dollars back into the wallets of our customers. And we would be excited to have a conversation. Again, the email there is revleak at italentdigital.com. Go to our website, and we would welcome the opportunity to work with any of the participants on this call as well.